A fuel choice that even rivals can agree on? Now that's worth the hype. Pump it up with Unleaded 88.
This fall, the Sandman, Adam Sandler, You're My Best Friend Tour.
I feel like we're very good friends now.
Casey Center, Saturday, October 4th. Get tickets now at HiVTix.com.
Time for Hawks on Tap. Proudly poured by Bud Light. Featuring Andrew Downs and the best Iowa media personalities. Live from Buffalo Wild Wings across Iowa.
I feel like that could be false advertising.
Yeah,
the best media talent. This is not Andrew Downs, I can tell you that much right now. Todd Brommelkamp sitting alongside Scott Dochterman.
Yeah, two old German dudes here. So, no Andrew Downs. So if any of you were here to hear Andrew, we apologize profusely and we'll give you your money back.
We are at the Buffalo Wild Wings in downtown Iowa City, the old Capitol Mall, my old stomping grounds from back in the day. And Scott used to work upstairs at the Cedar Rapids Gazette, hanging out and getting ready for Iowa's season opener tomorrow against the Albany Great Danes.
Doesn't that just get your juices flowing to hear about the Great Danes?
We will spend a little bit of time on them over the course of the program, but primarily we're focusing on the Hawkeyes and the season to come. We've got some great prizes for people who want to stop out. Again, downtown Iowa City, Old Capitol Mall. We've got some Buffalo Wild Wings gift cards we're going to be giving away with some Hawkeye opener trivia. We've got a great Bud Light cooler that we'll be giving away at the end of the night as well. So we are off and running, and it's great to be here. First of all, I didn't know whether my days talking Hawkeye football were done yet or not, but they at least brought me back for the opener here against Albany. And Scott, I'll ask you here, the feeling on this 2025 team. I know I was reading Tyler Tashman's piece in the Des Moines Register this week about this feels like they're sort of turning the page. Like maybe last year was a continuation of 2023 to 2024, but this sort of feels like maybe a new page for Kirk Ferentz in year number 27.
Yeah, I think part of it was personnel, that they returned most of the same guys as the year before, and we know what kind of offense did take place the year before, which wasn't very good. But now with a new quarterback, with the system now firmly in place, I think Iowa feels that sense of they're in a different direction. And you can tell the excitement and the vibes are there, that they feel like they're much improved. They seem to be, both from the very few views we get, and who knows what they're all about when we see them at Kids Day or back in April at the spring practice. But you talk to people even off record and just get a vibe for them, and they all seem pretty excited. And I would say that by and large, the vibe has been cautious optimism, that people feel good about this team, but it's also a little bit of wait and see, and wow, that schedule could be really difficult.
Well, we will get into all of the measurables with the Hawkeyes here. We got about 90 minutes with you. Of course, the Iowa Everywhere YouTube stream right now. We're live if you want to join in and heckle us or weigh in. And we are also on closed captioned broadcasts in every Buffalo Wild Wings across the state of Iowa. And I'm told a couple in Nebraska too. So our apologies to the Huskers who may be listening. But shout out to my personal favorite Buffalo Wild Wings in Clinton. Don't know whether Brad or any of my friends are there watching tonight. But Buffalo Wild Wings all across the state of Iowa, Hawkeye football games, $4 Bud Lights during football games, Hawkeye football games all season long. Of course, Buffalo Wild Wings also an official partner of the University of Iowa Hawkeyes. So let's dive right into, I think, the one topic that I think people are probably most looking forward to tomorrow, and that is the debut of Mark Gronowski.
That's where all eyes should be and will be. He's one of the most successful quarterbacks in NCAA history when you start to look at wins. He's got 49 of them, 2 national championships at South Dakota State. He was, the FCS Player of the Year, the Walter Payton Player of the Year in 2023. But this is a completely different level. And coming to the Big Ten, now tomorrow is not a Big Ten opponent, but beginning next week, you're going to be playing some pretty good teams the rest of the season. And I think he's looking at it as an opportunity to showcase his abilities to be a NFL quarterback, which the likelihood was if he didn't have the shoulder injury, would have gotten drafted. But I think for Iowa, it's also an opportunity to have someone who is capable of leading this team and actually having quarterback-driven victories, something we haven't seen in probably 10 years, Todd.
Well, I was going to say, interestingly enough, he's also somewhat familiar with the team that they're going to be playing because they played them a couple years ago in Albany's greatest season in program history, and then they were summarily bounced out of the FCS playoffs. I think the final score was 59-0 that day. Albany has the same defensive coordinator, Bill Nessett. I was reading some of his comments earlier this week. They've got one remaining starter from that 2023 game. He had 12 tackles in that contest. But Mark Gronowski, as you said, making the move from South Dakota State. I think it's interesting with the fans. I don't want to say there's trepidation here, but the last time that Iowa really went into the portal and went big for a quarterback, it backfired on them.
No question. There was a lot of reasons for that, and I think it's, I was excited about Cade McNamara. I thought Cade McNamara would be a good player for Iowa based on what he was able to do at Michigan. But there was a lot of discussion that, he led Michigan to the Big Ten championship. Well, it was really more Michigan led him to the Big Ten championship, and J.J. McCarthy just wasn't quite experienced enough to do it. They played even amount of snaps, but he struggled against the Hawkeyes in that championship game. I watched it a couple weeks ago, and so, but then there was the off the field stuff, which I think was not really representative of what Iowa wants in a player. And whether it was the concussion symptoms, that's one thing, but the way he kind of left his teammates hanging at the end was something that we've never seen before. And I understand that Iowa fans in all the sports have a lot of scar tissue, and it's just something, like when Ben McCollum got hired, it's like immediately, well, it's just going to be another Todd Linkletter. Or Mark Gronowski, they pick him up, well, it's just going to be another Cade McNamara, and you guys got to get over that. And because when you look at what Mark Gronowski has done and how he's performed, and statistically, and then of course, engineering victory, he's everything that Iowa wants. It's just a matter, can he catch up to the speed of the game and then engineer victory in the Big Ten?
I'm glad you brought up Ben McCollum, Iowa's new basketball coach, because I think it's a good reminder that you can win no matter what level that you're at. There was some trepidation last year with Drake fans bringing a guy up from D2, and he won. And now Iowa taking the dip with him, and we'll see. Basketball season's far enough. I know you guys are ready to talk Hawkeye football, but what have you seen from Mark Gronowski so far in the limited, as you said, the limited bits and pieces that we have seen from him?
He's got a massive frame for his, he's 6'3", but he is physical. I mean, he looks like he could play tight end. I mean, he's 230, 235. I mean, by all accounts, he wins his heats, against the tight ends and the linebackers in races and stuff. So he's a really good, agile quarterback, and they showed that in limited scope at Kids Day. And the other part with Kids Day, you could tell that was about as vanilla of a practice they ever called. Not as much motion. The route tree was pretty limited. But the positives are he seems to know where to throw the ball and when the guys get open. The things that I want to see more of that I wasn't sure about was maybe he was a little bit behind on some passes, and that sometimes comes with better chemistry, and it takes time to develop that, but you got to speed that up. The season's here, and this week you might be able to get away with that. Next week you're not. So let's see how he's progressed and see how they perform against a different defense, because Iowa's defense is usually pretty good. Well,
you mentioned the scar tissue with Iowa fans and transfer quarterbacks. The injury that was announced shortly after Mark Gronowski came, but certainly looks like he's fully recovered from that at this point.
Yeah, there's nothing to worry about with that. It was an injury that he could have played with. He did play with last year when they made to the FCS semifinals and lost that terrific game against North Dakota State. And Cam Miller, who's from Solon and got signed to the Raiders practice team, just after getting cut the other day, that showed that he was still capable of it. But in his case, it was go to the NFL like that, but the NFL would over-evaluate him, and he probably wouldn't get drafted. So he decided to come back to college, get that taken care of. The window was through June, and he had the surgery in January. It was slightly torn labrum. And by the end of spring football, you could tell he was starting to have some zip on the ball, and then there was nothing. You couldn't tell that he might have had an issue at all in Kids Day. He was on target, or his accuracy, his in 7-on-7, and then of course his zip on the ball was right there.
Well, let's go ahead and continue to talk about the quarterbacks then. I think, again, no surprise here, new football season, and fans are interested in the quarterback situation. I can't remember whether it was you that I was discussing this with or someone else a couple weeks ago, but the quarterback room as a whole, it's been a while since Kirk Ferentz and the Hawkeyes have had that much talent, at least surface level. You've got Mark Gronowski, you've got Hank Brown, the Auburn transfer, whom they listed as number 2. And your thoughts on the quarterback room going into the season and the depth?
You're right. This is the best depth that they've had. The last time I can think of, Todd, where they had this type of group, probably when there was C.J. Beathard,
14, 15.
Yeah, Jake Rudock, and the guy who went to Louisiana Tech. His name escapes me. He's the JUCO kid that was really good, and he started down there and had a great season.
Is that Sokol?
Sokol, yeah.
Cody Sokol.
Yeah. That's where I look at this right now, because Hank Brown has started games in the SEC and at Auburn, and he did it as a young player, and he played in a bowl game as a true freshman, and last year he started a couple games. They went to the portal and got Jackson Arnold from Oklahoma. They wanted an immediate upgrade, and they felt like they had it. He's a 5-star talent. It's understandable. Hank Brown wanted an opportunity. He came to Iowa, and he's probably been as impressive of any player that they've had, because when Iowa got him and then went and signed Mark Gronowski, you figured, okay, he's just a backup. He's even like Brendan Sullivan last year. Instead, he has wowed everybody in practice to the point where, God forbid, he has to play in an important situation, that they feel like they're confident that he can do it. And he's tall, long, he has a great motion, throws the ball with touch and depth as well. So he's got pretty much every element you want there. He's not quite as fast, it appears, as Mark Gronowski is, and certainly not as quick as Brendan Sullivan. There aren't many quarterbacks quicker than him. But I think he is the type of player that, if he continues to progress, the next year they won't have to hit the portal. And then the other guy who's going to be a fan favorite, and I can just see the quarterback battle going on in fans' minds next year, is Jeremy Heklinski, who was he's a redshirt freshman here. He's from Wake Forest, and I would compare him favorably to Drew Tate. Same kind of fire, same kind of height, same style. Kind of a gambler. And so next year in the spring and in the summer and probably in camp, you're going to see those two battle, and it's a major upgrade from where they've been. And it also feels like that whoever wins that will be a competitive quarterback and then put them in a better situation than they've been, in quite a while.
Well, I don't think you'd call me a major upgrade over Andrew Downs, but Todd Brommelkamp, Scott Dochterman filling in for AD tonight here on Hawks on Tap. Buffalo Wild Wings, Old Capitol Mall in downtown Iowa City. We got some $25 gift cards we're giving away, again, broadcasting statewide tonight. And that $4 Bud Light deal during Hawkeye football games that I mentioned earlier, that's statewide. That's every Buffalo Wild Wings in the state. Again, they are an official partner of the Iowa Hawkeyes. Let's stay on the quarterbacks here for just another second or two. How many quarterbacks do you think we see tomorrow against this Albany team? I don't want to jump ahead and preview the game just yet, but this does shape up to be one of those openers where I don't think it's going to take an injury to get the backups on the floor.
Yeah, I think they're talking. I think 3 is possible. If I'm to map it out, I would say that Mark Gronowski maybe plays a half and then maybe a series into the third quarter. I think you'll see Hank Brown for the rest of the third quarter and maybe a series into the fourth, and then you maybe see Jeremy Heklinski, finish out the game. I think that's that type of game. And that's a good situation for them. You want to reward your players who've had good camps, and Hank Brown has done that. Make sure he gets some snaps, because you never know when you may need him, and that's really important. But also make sure your starter plays well, and he's more than capable of doing that, as you mentioned, in that playoff game against the same opponent.
And now, that being said, there have been some openers where the Hawkeyes have struggled in the past. This doesn't look like one of them, and we will get to Albany coming up in just a little bit. Kickoff 5:10 tomorrow night inside Kinnick Stadium, a night game for the opener.
It's going to be perfect weather too, Todd. I mean,
I will be there. I will be there out in the stands, Joe Schmo, just living my best civilian life at this point.
Yeah, I would say, that's number one. If you could be number two, you want to be here and get your $4 Bud Lights because they're a little more expensive at the stadium tomorrow.
just a little bit
just
more.
a little bit more. But this is. I like the fact that they're kicking off at 5. I think it's a great window for Iowans don't like the 8 o'clock kickoffs because that'll mean they get home a little bit too late. But 5 o'clock is going to be good, and by the time that everybody leaves, they're going to be leaving at a good time.
We'll spend a little bit of time later on in the show today taking a look around the rest of the Big Ten. Of course, we had some games last night. A lot of eyes on Columbus this week for the Ohio State-Texas game as well. But most eyes here in the Hawkeye State, at least among Hawkeye fans, on Kinnick Stadium coming up tomorrow. Let's talk offense as a whole here and the mastermind behind it. This is year number 2 now for Tim Lester. And going back to some comments that I overheard him say at Media Day this year, he seems to believe that everybody understands some of the terminology and routes and plays that he brought last year. And maybe not everybody was on the same page last year, but he seems to be really high on the receivers room this year too, which I find interesting.
That's, you start to wonder, is that wishful thinking or is that reality? And I think it's probably a little both, but you're going to talk your guys up. But I think we also saw both in the spring game and then in the open scrimmage, the Kids Day scrimmage, that the receivers have taken a step forward. Is it going to be good enough to win in the Big Ten? We just won't know that until we start seeing them play those teams. But I do think whether it's Sam Phillips, who's the starter and has come over from Chattanooga and has 2,000 yards in his career there, and last year was terrific. But some of the other ones that have really caught our eye, Seth Anderson is finally healthy, and he looks to be the player that we expected him when he came over from Charleston Southern, where he was the Big South Freshman of the Year. His father is Flipper Anderson, who still holds the NFL record for most receiving yards in a game, and he looks like he's got everything you want from that position, whether it's slot or the Z. And Jacob Gill gets kind of forgotten, but he was the leading wide receiver, pass catcher last year. And then there's some younger ones. KJ Parker is one that's been discussed a lot, especially from Tim Lester. And Jarrett Bowie and Dayton Howard, when I'm conveniently leaving out one person who's a little dinged up for a while.
I did hear you say Z earlier,
yeah.
So Iowa did say that it got through camp relatively unscathed, but there was the report this week that Reese Vander-Zee probably going to miss some time.
Yeah, it sounds like a stress fracture or stress reaction, one of the two. I remember Mike Gazelle having that issue for a while, going way back when. And that's an issue because I thought he had a chance to be a breakout performer, and he will in the second half of the season. But to miss a month, I mean, you're talking about 5+ games, and that's going to be tough for Iowa and for him. But overall, this is a unit in Caden Weegan, first-team All-American kick returner, and he's going to see the ball a lot wide out. I think they've got depth, and then it's a matter of can they find separation among those players at that position group. That remains to be seen what that entails. Tomorrow there's going to be openings, and I keep leaning on next week we'll really see.
Is there a game next week?
Well, unless something bad happens that we don't know about.
Unless something bad might happen next week. I don't know. We'll wait and see what the Hawkeyes look like tomorrow night. That should be a great game at Jack Trice Stadium in Ames coming up next week. Of course, we invite you to follow along all next week on Iowa Everywhere, getting ready for Cy-Hawk Week. Stop on and join us again, Buffalo Wild Wings at the Old Capitol Mall here in downtown Iowa City. Got the FAC vibes going on. Soon to shift over to the night before a Hawkeye football game. If you've never done downtown Iowa City the night before a Hawkeye football game, it's one of the things that you've got to do at this point. We're talking about the offense here, talking about Tim Lester. If you are watching on the YouTube broadcast, by the way, we would love to have you interact with us. Scott mentioned breakout players. If you've got anybody in mind that you think will be a breakout player for the Hawkeyes this year, let us know on the YouTube. How are things going?
We've got a guy, Bus, who mentions, would it seem reasonable to anticipate basic route trees with a mix of receivers and running backs as they work through the 3 quarterbacks, provided the game situations allowed for it? And, as far as basic goes, I think they feel like they're a little bit beyond basic. And last year would have been totally basic and vanilla. But I would expect them to feel like that those 7 or 8 receivers that will get a lot of action will have the opportunity to run their full offense. Now, how much of that do they run? Yeah, that remains to be seen.
Bus looks like he was at the Rose Bowl back in 2015.
Yes.
Bus, I want to know, did you make it to the end, or were you one of the Hawkeye fans who left early? You can be honest with us.
Yes, exactly. I remember going to the airport after that game, Todd, and that was not the happiest group of fans I've ever seen. Mostly that, not that they didn't want them to win, but they felt like, come on, give us a chance here.
Bus, interestingly enough, Tim Lester did talk about route trees at Media Day, and one of the things that I took away from him is he seems to believe that the receivers understand this year better than last year that just because you draw a line on a chalkboard or a telestrator or whatever, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's the way that the play is going to go. And I got the sense from Lester at Media Day that the players understand that they can freelance a little bit more. Maybe that's not the right way to phrase it, but they don't have to follow the exact X's and O's. If somebody does something that they see creates an opening, take advantage of it. So I think I'm in agreement with you. I think it's a talented group of wide receivers this year, and I'll buy into Tim Lester's hype with that group a little bit.
Yeah, I'm there too. I think they're going to be exciting and interesting. Now, will they be great? Let's just wait. But I'll say that I think there's enough talent, and they're finally together. That's been the problem. The attrition level over the last 15 years has just been off the charts at that position group, and so it's been hard for them to gain any kind of consistency. And now they have changed the offense dramatically. The route tree is different, but route adjustments are going to be critical to how the level of success when they play good defensive backs, and they're going to face Iowa State and Indiana, who have outstanding All-American caliber defensive backs, and they're going to have to do that, and Gronowski's going to have to see it. So it's about their chemistry with one another. If they can manage that, then they'll be successful, and that's the next phase of this offense. One of the things that Tim Lester highlighted on Media Day was somebody asked, what was it about Gronowski that you've seen the most and you liked? It's the fact that he can change protections, and they never did it once last year. And if he can change protections and buy himself an extra fraction of a second, that guy may just break on, have an extra break and a flip second on the defensive back, and that could be the difference between a first down, potentially even a touchdown.
Brian, I agree with you. We're going to get to the game itself, but Brian says he thinks the Hawks are going to win by 40 plus tomorrow. We will spend a little bit of time talking about Albany coming up in just a little bit. Beginning the show today talking about the Iowa offense. Normally the defense is the focus with the Hawkeyes, but the one position that we really haven't touched on yet on the offensive side of the ball seems to be a big one. They lose Caleb Johnson. And Caleb Johnson was such a huge part of the success that they had last year when they did have success on offense. Do you see Kamari Moulton filling that lead role? Do you see them changing things up? I know last year Terrell Washington Jr. was a popular name at Media Day. He's heading into his sophomore season. How do you think the backfield shapes up this year?
I really like it. I think it's going to also be running back by committee. And it has to be at this point until somebody establishes themselves. I think what's interesting is that in Vegas, Kamari Moulton is a 7-1 favorite. He and Mekhi Hughes from Oregon, who went to Tulane last year, but they're the two favorites to lead the Big Ten in rushing. So there's a lot of belief that Kamari Moulton will be a successful running back. But from what I've seen is that is a really balanced and deep backfield. And even the depth chart shows that. T.J. Washington was a guy who played wide receiver last year. They've moved him back. I had a conversation with Liddell Betts over in Indianapolis during the combine. He told me he expects T.J. and Kamari to really have breakout years, and they're both weapons. I think you look at Jazz Patterson. He's the steady guy. He's the physical guy. He's really kind of punched past his weight when it comes to running the football, but the guy that's caught everybody's eye is Nathan McNeil. And he's a true freshman. He wears 25, so he reminds me of another guy who wore 25.
And not even listed on the depth chart
He's not
this
even
week
listed.
for the opener. So they are deep at that position, but they probably don't have a Caleb Johnson type this year.
And he's so special. I mean, I don't know if people truly appreciate how good he was. I mean, it's kind of like these fleeting, him and Sean Green kind of have similar type years in some ways because they kind of came out of nowhere, and you're wondering. I mean, Sean had the issue with academics that cost him a year, and Caleb was kind of on that. Are you going to be good, or are you just going to kind of fade to the background? And then he had an outstanding year. He's an NFL team for a reason and might start for the Steelers this year. So I don't know that there's anybody that's in that neighborhood. But kind of like what we saw at linebacker, you're not going to find another athlete like Jack Campbell at that position. But Jay Higgins stepped in and had a heck of a career there. He's not as gifted athletically, but he was as solid as they come. And I think that could be the same situation here where they may be able to rush for the same amount of yards total. It just might not be one guy doing it like Caleb Johnson did.
Well, the ground game is going to come down to the play up front for the Hawkeyes this year. And in the past, it's been a little bit of ever since Tyler Linderbaum left, the offensive line has kind of been up and down. But this looks like a pretty good group. You've got a veteran center coming back in Logan Jones. Jennings Dunker, I think, is going to be having an all Big Ten caliber season. A couple new names popping up on the depth chart this year. You got Cade Pieper as the starter at right guard. And then Trevor Locke, most likely at left tackle, along with Jack Dotzler. So a little bit of a battle going on there that they're still trying to figure out.
Yeah, that's going to probably go on for a while too, Todd. I mean, there's three guys that are still kind of in play there at left tackle. Bryce George came in. He was a Division II All-American, but as soon as he came in, he started realizing that there is a sizable jump at the next level, and he started, I'm not sure I'm ready for this. So they've been working him at guard too, just to see if they can get him on the field at some point, and he'll play tomorrow. But it's going to take some time for him, and he may not have enough time because, as you said, Trevor Locke, as a sophomore, they believe in him. They really think that he is a guy that's a future starter, whether one side or the other. And Jack Dotzler is another one that they feel like has had a trajectory where now he's put himself in that position. They admit also that on the spring scrimmage that Dotzler had his worst practice, and he looked like it because, the defensive ends wanted to show off too.
Yeah.
But when you look at the offensive line as a whole, Iowa's right there with Oregon and Penn State as the best offensive lines in the Big Ten. They have the best center in the country, in my opinion, in Logan Jones. I mean, you look at every metric you want, and he's right there. And plus, he squats 705 pounds, which is
that'll help also.
So he can lift one of these cars out here in the outside the Penn Mall and put him over his shoulders probably. But Jennings Dunker, the same thing, 680, and he's mad because he's like, I actually squatted more reps at a higher weight than Logan because they're very competitive, as you know.
Solon Beef Days hay bale toss champion, back-to-back years, for Jennings Dunker. Before we move off the offense, and again, if you've got any questions about the offense, go ahead and put them into the YouTube chat. We'll try to hit those throughout the broadcast today. Tight end is a position that we have not mentioned, which is weird because Iowa has churned out tight ends, but I think it's a relatively stable position this year, and I fold them in with the receivers, but Addison Ostrenga listed as the starting tight end. You got Zach Ortworth and Hayden Large as the number 3 tight end for the Hawkeyes. So I don't think tight end's going to be much of a problem this year.
No, you just wonder, can Addison Ostrenga, he was hurt last year. His arm was in a sling for a lot of the season, and you wonder, can he take that next step and be the Iowa tight end? And I think there's a lot of faith that he can be. Zach Ortworth is maybe the most talented of the receivers of the upper level tight ends, and he's going to play a lot because they do run a lot of 12 personnel. And as Iowa will not change from that, even with Tim Lester. They're going to run a lot of 11, which is 3 wide receivers, but they're still going to incorporate a lot of 2 tight ends. And Hayden Large is big, physical, tough, almost, he was a fullback in the old offense, and now he's a tight end in this one, and he's going to be kind of a motion guy. He's going to hit, and he's also going to be able to be to catch passes in the flat. So there's a lot there. And, Ben wants to know a little bit more about left tackle, and I do think that it's going to end up being Lauk long term, but Dotzler is going to see a lot, and kind of, my conversations with George Barnett, even on the side and what have you, is that he expects this to go on for a few weeks. Like tomorrow, they're going to probably rotate him, and they're probably going to rotate him against UMass. They'll settle down the rotation a little bit at Iowa State. And you might see Bryce George there too, but this is something that it may take them time just to see who's performing well in games to get that kind of level of separation.
And worth noting, Dotzler is at multiple positions on the depth chart. So anytime you see a guy's name pop up in multiple spots, you know the Hawkeyes like him. And Ben, listening, Frisco, Texas, home of the Rough Riders. We got Mike in... Robert is in Milwaukee. You want to let us know it's Iowa everywhere, and not just between the Missouri and the Mississippi rivers. If you want to let us know on YouTube where you are consuming the show tonight, do let us know. We got about an hour to go. We're going to touch on the defense. We're going to touch on the special teams. We got these $25 gift cards to Buffalo Wild Wings that Andy has provided with us. We're going to give the first one away right now. All you need to do, and we do have some folks who are here with us at the Iowa City Buffalo Wild Wings, is let Aiden know that you got the answer to the trivia question. But when is the last time Iowa opened the season against a Big Ten opponent? That's our first trivia question for a $25 gift card to Buffalo Wild Wings. Again, an official partner of the Iowa Hawkeyes. $4 Bud Lights during every Iowa football game all season long. That's home and away, and that is at every Buffalo Wild Wings across the state of Iowa. Let's go ahead and wait for our winner there and shift gears to the defense. And Scott, that's where I find things to be a little bit interesting this year with the Hawkeyes, because normally nobody worries about the defense. This year, you lose 11 of your 22 starters, 7 of the 11 on the defensive side of the football. What's Phil Parker got to work with this year?
There's a lot there, a lot of talent, and I think there's a lot of young guys that have to step up. When you look at the players that they lost, mano a mano, in some ways, and this happens in a lot of sports, that I think talent-wise they've upgraded in the secondary, for instance. When you look at, for instance, Sebastian Castro was a really big physical hitter, but I think Zach Lutmer, who's going to replace him at Cash, is actually more of a better cover defender. He's faster, and now the hitter part of it and the Castro is unique in that. But then also Cohen Entringer, I think he's a breakout performer. He's really shown over the years an ability to, I think going back to the Michigan game where he misses the tackle and then he chases down the punt returner inside the 5. I mean, that's awesome. That was an awesome play. And then I think Xavier Wampa moving to free is going to be really helpful, because I think people associate strong safety with Bob Sanders, like some big hitter, but actually it's more about sides of the field, because they play 2 deep safeties. Strong side means wide side of the field, and then you look at the free, which is more the boundary side, which means he can be more physical in that space. So I think it's a good move there, but it's just going to really be more about can anybody break out. We did have a question kind of early in our chat there from Kelvin Fisher about any younger cornerbacks other than the top 3 rising, and that's pretty interesting here.
Yeah, you look at the depth chart with the corners. You've got Deshaun Lee listed at the right corner and TJ Hall at the left corner. I'll turn that over to you, Scott, if you want to weigh in on that one, as far as guys that you think could be a breakout candidate there in the defensive backfield.
Yeah, I think when you look at corner, it's really 3 guys that have really kind of worked their way into that. And as you mentioned, TJ Hall is going to be the number 1 corner, and he was hurt a little bit during spring, during the fall camp, but he should be back, and he does look that part. We've seen it from Phil Parker just about every year, Todd, where you've got a guy who steps in, steps up, and all of a sudden, oh, by the way, they're second team or first team All Big Ten. And I think TJ Hall is built that way. Deshaun Lee's had his ups and downs. He's had good moments, and then moments you're like, I don't know if it's going to work for you, buddy. But I think he's more than capable. He's still only a junior, so that happens. And then the other one who has really come on and is pushing for playing time is Jalen Watson, who's a sophomore. And, with him and Rashad Godfrey both, who's a redshirt freshman, those are the 2 that are pushing. And then along with Shahid Barrios, from South Dakota. So they've got some depth. It's just a matter of, can Deshaun Lee continue to make strides to where they feel he's consistent enough to play? Will TJ Hall become the shutdown corner that everybody else has been over the years? Maybe not a Riley Moss, but in that category. And then, can Jalen Watson step in when called upon and perform well?
Linebacker group. By the way, if you're a Hawkeye fan and you have not seen the video of Jay Higgins being informed that he is going to make the Ravens team this year, seek that out on social media. I think you would agree with me. We don't like to play favorites in the media, but everybody that covered the Hawkeyes during his tenure there will be rooting for him in Baltimore.
Yeah. What a great video. That's one of those where you just kind of go, you don't want to, you try not to separate professionalism here, but a tear comes to your eye when you see somebody who's worked so hard and was undrafted, which was stupid. Too many teams in the NFL go height, weight, speed in the combine, and they overthink it. And then all of a sudden, here comes this guy who's the highest-ranked linebacker in preseason football, and he's,
a tackle machine.
Yeah.
He's only nose for the ball.
He's done it his whole career, and he makes the Baltimore Ravens, which is one of the smartest organizations in football, and I'm thrilled for him. The one thing that is they're going to have to replace him and Nick Jackson, who's second all-time in college career tackles, and he's on the practice team now with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So that's going to be a chore. When you look at Jaden Harrell, who's been there for 5 years, Carson Shire 5 years, and Jackson Rexroth, who worked his way up from being a walk-on to a starter.
There's my breakout candidate on the defensive side of the ball.
Jackson.
By the way, Jackson Rexroth, Cedar Rapids Xavier product, was actually in the studio with me on the radio show during the postseason, getting ready for spring football, and just a good kid, and I think another one of those homegrown local. They tend to do well in Cedar Rapids, Iowa City, Solon area. Mount Vernon. We'll throw Mount Vernon in there just in case Matt Kroll's listening.
Yes. Well, a good note here with Jackson's father, Jason Rexroth. Jason and Joel, his younger brother, was my best friend in kindergarten in West Burlington, and I see Jason all the time on Iowa Live, and I've known them for 45 years, and so I couldn't be happier personally to see his son go from a walk-on, and the troubles that class had, because they were seniors during COVID, and they didn't have a chance to go to camps. And then by the time that their senior year had wrapped up, all the players who were still at colleges decided to stick for the extra year, so it dried up all those scholarships. So, perhaps Jackson Rexroth may not have come to Iowa as a walk-on, but maybe he would have gotten a MAC offer or something like that. But he had to walk on, and then he don't get the extra year that players like Jay Higgins and Nick Jackson were able to get. So they've had to go through some tough times. I mean, Jaden Harrell had to, Jay Higgins is coming back, great for our team, but what about me personally? This shrinks my opportunities. But I think with Jackson and Carson, who I think might be my breakout performer, very athletic guy, I would call him, this is going way back, I'm sure you remember him, Jeff Tarpinian,
Jeff Tarpinian.
Yeah, very talented.
That is going way back.
Very talented guy, but was injury prone, and that was really unfortunate. And, that's kind of been Carson's career to this point. But if he's healthy, they expect him to be one of the better linebackers in the Big Ten.
Depth chart going into tomorrow's season opener. You've got Jackson Rexroth at the Leo, Jaden Harrell at the middle linebacker, and Carson Scherer at the weak side linebacker. Another Cedar Rapids Xavier product up front on that defensive line, Ethan Herkett, another guy that I think could have a big season. Max Llewellyn, Aaron Graves, Bryce Hawthorne across the front. What type of pressure do you expect the Hawkeyes to get this season? Not just tomorrow, but throughout the year with those four and beyond, because we know that the Hawkeyes and Phil Parker like to shuttle 6, 7, 8 guys in if they have the depth.
This is really interesting because Bryce Hawthorne is a sophomore, and he came from South Dakota State, and we kind of expected him, I expected him anyway, to be more of a rotational piece this year, that Jonah Pace, who's a senior from Central Michigan, would be the starter, or possibly Jeremiah Pittman, who has been dinged up. But when you see Bryce Hawthorne, he, by all accounts, everybody's been like, okay, he's a dude. He's really good. Now, it's unfair to compare anybody to Y.A. Black, because he really smoked offensive linemen in just about every possible way. He didn't get a lot of statistics, but he wasn't asked to get a lot of statistics. Ethan Herkett is your try-hard, tough Iowa dude, Parker Hesse-like, just really focused. He's the leader. He's going to do everything it takes. My breakout guys, though, the guys that can take them to the next level up front, Aaron Graves, we've known about him for a long time. He's played ever since the true freshman year. This could be he could be one of the best defensive linemen in the country. And I think Max Llewellyn is also in that category for me. Probably their best edge rusher when it came to sacking the quarterback last year. And now he gets a chance to start. And I think those two could be dominant figures in the Big Ten.
Robert got the first trivia question. Unfortunately, you got to be here with us at the Buffalo Wild Wings in the old Capitol Mall in downtown Iowa City to win. But Robert, maybe we can find somebody to spend that for you in your stead. We've still got a couple more of those to give away. We've got a great Bud Light cooler to give away as well. And of course, Buffalo Wild Wings statewide airing the show tonight. Iowa everywhere, literally everywhere tonight. And remember, you can get $4 Bud Lights at every Buffalo Wild Wings in the state of Iowa during Hawkeye football games, and that starts tomorrow night, 5:10 kickoff inside Kinnick Stadium. Todd Brommelkamp and Scott Dochterman pinch hitting for Andrew Downs and the rest of the Iowa Everywhere crew as we're getting ready for that opener tomorrow. We've spent a little bit of time already on the offensive side of the football, cleaned up the defensive side as well. Scott, when I look at this team, I think Iowa could have one of the best special teams units across the board, kicker, punter, return game, not just in the Big Ten, but in the country this year.
Yeah, I think they are the best. You look at Drew Stevens, one of the top kickers in the country, probably number 2 in the Big Ten because Dominic Zavada from Michigan he had 7 50-plus yard field goals last year, but Drew is one of the very best kickers in the country, and he'll prove it this year. Reese Dakin, I thought, it's hard to fill Tory Taylor's shoes because AP came out with the greatest players of all time list, and he was the number 1 punter in college football history. But I thought he held his own. I thought he did a really nice job last year as a true freshman, coming in with those expectations. And Caden Weegan was only first-team All-American. And he only returned a punt and a kickoff for a touchdown. And he was a weapon as a punt returner. If you can gain a first down every single time you touch the ball, that's huge for your offense. And, in Iowa's case, not so much last year, but in the past, that was huge to make sure you get better position to punt. but now I think, the only question I have is long snapper. But, that's something that you would hope that works its way out.
Well, let's finish up here on the team as a whole this year, going back to something Tim Lester said at Media Day. He would like this team to average, and I know we've done the whole average number of points here with the Hawkeyes a couple years ago, but he thinks this team can average 30 points a year, Scott. 30 points a game. 30 points a year would have been a couple years ago.
Right.
30 points a game, pardon me for misspeaking there. Do you think that that's a reasonable 30 points a game for an Iowa football team would really be impressive to me? Do you think that's feasible?
I do, because they did it in 20 and they did it in 18 when they had a couple pretty good tight ends in 18, and in 20 they were as good as they've really ever been by the end of the year, the COVID year. Last year they averaged 27.7 points, which was up from 15.4. And really,
you had to bring that up.
I know, the 15.4, but man, they won the division with 15.4. It just shows you how amazing that defense was. But to go to 27, and really that was a number that kind of came down as the season progressed. I mean, they scored 13 points against Nebraska. They were in the 30s for most of the season last year and scored, 40-plus in 4 games at home. Washington and Northwestern, had a 38-point game in there. Wisconsin, it looked like Zambonis that day. I think that it's very much a possibility. Now, their schedule is pretty daunting. It is a challenge that they're going to have to face. But I think it's also, if, you're putting the magic word if in there, but if Mark Gronowski is a good quarterback with this offensive line, which is one of the better ones in the Big Ten, I think they have the ability to get to 30 points a game. And tomorrow is going to be, the drive for 325 might just be tomorrow's game, not just the season.
Before we get to tomorrow's game, since you brought the schedule up, let's go ahead and take a dive here because this is the first and really the last time we're going to get to do this before things get underway. The non-conference schedule hinges on Iowa State. I think we all agree with that. But you're absolutely right. The Big Ten schedule this season for the Hawkeyes is much more difficult than it was last season, and I think that's going to factor into a lot of people's season win-loss predictions, which, by the way, again, if you'd like to share those with us on the YouTube broadcast or Iowa Everywhere on social media, you can let us know. I know Chad Leistico at the Des Moines Register thinks 10-2. I'm kind of in the 8-9 camp. And that's, I think, generous with this schedule, but Big Ten opener this year at Rutgers on a Friday night. I watched a little bit of them last night. Ohio gave them everything that they could handle. And then I don't have my reading glasses on here, so and I don't have the schedule committed to heart. But yeah, the next one's pretty good. Indiana.
That's the
coming
game of the
to
year.
Kinnick Stadium. We'll get into the Big Ten overview in just a little bit. At Wisconsin on October 11th. We saw Wisconsin last night in their opener. They did not look very good, in my opinion. Penn State on October 18th. I know a lot of Hawkeye fans will have that one circled and feeling that a lot of people feel that will be a night game. I've heard 2:30 on that one. So if you're dead set on seeing a game under the lights at Kinnick Stadium this year, these next two are your chance, I think. The 5-10 opener tomorrow against Albany. Minnesota to close out October, and then November. Oregon, at USC, Michigan State, and at Nebraska. Now, the first thing that jumped out at me when I looked at the schedule earlier this year, a lot of the teams that were better last year, your Oregons, your Indianas, your Penn States, Iowa gets the benefit of playing them at Kinnick Stadium. I think it comes down to what they do in some of those road games as to whether or not you're 10-2 or whether you're 9 or 8 wins.
You're right. And we at The Athletic, Stu Mandel and I, we go through and we project bowls. And this one wasn't me. This was actually Stu, if you could believe that. And he's like, am I insane for thinking Iowa might go to the playoff?
He's not the only person that I've seen predict that. I saw somebody, I can't remember whether it was CBS or somebody said, you got to pick one of these 30 to 40 teams, top 40, top 30, under the radar. When you start talking about a team being under the radar, you're no longer under the radar.
Right.
But somebody every year, Indiana last year is a great example. Somebody usually jumps up and spoils those preseason predictions, and it may very well be the Hawkeyes this year, and I don't even want to think about it, but the wheels could come off, and with that schedule, it could be a grind of a season this year. But
it could go either way, and I think that's why there's cautious optimism, that you feel like this team has the ability to be to compete for that. But I would also say that there's enough difficulty that you lose close games, and this team has done it both ways. We've seen it over the many years since you were in school here to covering this team for 20 plus years, and same with me, that there's been years where all the luck's on their side. They win the close games, and then there's the years they don't. I mean, last year, they were 1-3 in one-score games. You look at Illinois, they were 5-1. Iowa State was 5-1 last year, and a lot of times that evens out. But when you look at they play 4 teams that won at least 11 games last year. They have the most difficult home schedule in the Big Ten. Their opponents were 33-12 in Big Ten play last year. Oregon obviously was number 1 in the country, for most of the season until the Rose Bowl. Penn State went to the semifinals. They're the number 2 team ranked in the country right now. Indiana won 11 games. I think if I was to circle one game, this is the most important game. It's Indiana. Because I think Indiana's for real, and I think Kirk Cignetti's for real, and they went and got a better quarterback in the portal than they had last year, and I thought Curtis Rourke was good last year. Fernando Mendoza, threw for 3,000 yards with a very average Cal team, and he is doing everything they're looking for. They're good at 3 levels on defense. They've got one of the best receivers outside of Jeremiah Smith, who is number 1. But Elijah Surratt at wide receiver, fantastic player. That's your Mark Gronowski game to me, because you can't just rely on going to 4-minute offense with 8 minutes to go and hope to win 17-13. You're going to have to keep scoring. Their offense is good enough to beat your defense with regularity. So that's your Mark Gronowski game. That's the game that's going to decide whether Iowa ends the year, at the great place of Tampa, where we're sitting with John James and enjoy our freebies, and
That's all your territory now. I'll be watching back at home. By the way, I swear that this is water and not Kool-Aid when I'm talking about Iowa having the best special teams unit in the country this year. The game that I think could be really interesting is that game at USC, just because Iowa. I know it's trite and cliche to say, well, they're going west, and we saw what happened last year. Now, the UCLA game was a Friday night game, and it was very strange. But anytime Iowa goes west, you worry a little bit, and that to me strikes me as a game that they could stub their toe. I mentioned the Rutgers game as a Friday. I'm much more comfortable with them playing a Friday game in the Eastern time zone than I would be if they were going west.
For sure, and watching Rutgers last night, they're obvious their defense is not improved. That should be a game where they have a lot of success there. And offensively, Ethan Kaliak-Manis is a nice quarterback. They played him in Minnesota. Jack Campbell intercepted him, and that was a 13-10 game where he actually scored a touchdown and got called back because there was not enough vision by the officials. And then, but I agree 1,000% if you can go that high with USC. That was a team last year that barely lost to Michigan in the final seconds. It was a team that lost in overtime to Penn State. It really was very close. Even Notre Dame, they lost by 2 touchdowns, but they had 2 pick sixes in the fourth quarter. They have a lot of talent. They brought in a lot of talent. You mentioned going west. It's only been successful like once that I can remember, and that was USC in the Holiday Bowl, 6 years ago. But with USC going there, here's a couple things with their reasons why they failed at UCLA last year. Jay Higgins was hurt, and their run defense was not good, especially when he left. Then Brendan Sullivan was really good at times, but whenever he made a mistake, you couldn't get him refocused. Yeah. And then he got hurt. Yeah. And then they had to go with
Jackson
a walk-on.
Stratton.
Yeah.
The rest, as they say, is history.
Right. So, it's going to be a day game out there, which is good for Iowa, I think. It's not going to be a night game out west. And by the way, the Penn State game, that's not going to be a night game unless both teams stink, because USC Notre Dame is going to be the NBC game that night. And so it's more than likely going to be noon or midday on CBS.
This guy has the spreadsheet of everything in front of him, all the TV games and everything, and I'm just sitting over here with my little notebook. If you want to let us know again, season. What do we have anybody with season predictions? I'm guessing everybody's thinking 12-0.
Yeah.
But we'll take a look here. 9-3, Robert says. Jeff at 10-2.
Yeah.
10-2, I think, is the top. And they're going to lose. 10-2. You've got to talk about the Iowa State game next weekend, because that one is going to be. I think if they lose that game, 10 is probably going to be a stretch this year.
Right, because then you're banking on beating everybody but one in your Big Ten, and I think 7-2 is about as good as it gets, and that's for just about anybody in that position. It's not just Iowa. It's if you were to give that same schedule to Indiana, I think that 7-2 would be the type of schedule, and that's what we're seeing now with these expanded conferences. That there's just going to be better teams. If you were to remove Oregon and USC and insert Purdue and Northwestern, then sure. Then it's like, okay, you circle the Penn State game, you beat your rivals, and you feel pretty good. But that adds a level of challenge to this schedule. So if you were to tell me, it's going to be 7-5 for sure, I wouldn't disagree with you. If you're going to say, hey, I can see everything pointing in the right direction. They win the close games. Their special teams makes, you get 10 extra yards per punt. You make a couple extra field goals, and boom, they're going to win They're going to go 4-0 in one-score games. I wouldn't disagree with you either. I think it's just that kind of a season.
Well, let's go ahead and get into the 2025 season and the season opener tomorrow night. 5:10 kickoff inside Kinnick Stadium. I believe the gates are opening at 3:30. And we were talking a little bit before the show started today. You believe that this is going to be one of the worst opening teams that Iowa has played in not even recent memory. You went all the way back to 85, right?
Yeah,
with Drake?
With Drake, yeah. I think it's this is a really tough game. There was one game in 04 where maybe it was Ball State had a ton of, or was it Ball State that had all those players who were suspended and it was 56-0. Maybe that I'm being over ambitious with the 40-year comparison here, but this is a team that went 4-8 last year. They have an interim head coach. They've got players coming in who have never started games, and now they're starting the quarterback. That's a tough ask to come to Iowa City and Kinnick Stadium and play a team like Iowa. And we're talking about Albany. We're talking about an FCS program. Their level of success in this game is just let's see if you can make a few plays. And so I think this is really rough. I don't know, though, let me ask you your opinion on this. Is it a good thing?
Nobody wants my opinion on anything, Scott, but I'll let you ask.
Hey, you're here sitting next to me. I would say, is it a good thing that they're playing an opponent that you expect them to just annihilate? Or is it a bad thing that they're not going to get tested before next week?
I'm going to do something that I used to hate when I was on the radio, and I'm walking down the center line of the interstate here because I see it both ways.
Yeah.
I see it as you blow Albany out 45-0 or something like that tomorrow, and then I do think Iowa State is in a little bit of a trap spot with their game. So I think you're going to have a lot of fans that convince themselves that going into Ames is going to be easy, and that's coming off a blowout win for Iowa. That's the hypothetical scenario. It's never easy going into Ames, and it won't be as long as Matt Campbell is there. The closer game, maybe that helps temper the expectations for the following week, but it's almost, damned if you do, damned if you don't, right? Hawkeye fans, if they're not winning 70-0 tomorrow, they'll find something maybe to nitpick with this. I agree with you. As far as openers go, this is not great, but we were talking before the show started today. My personal opinion is that now in the transfer portal era, NIL era, that trying to schedule some of these FCS games, if you're not going and getting the powerhouse, the Dakota schools, you're really it's a crapshoot at this point, because when this game was scheduled, I don't think Albany was as bad as it is this year. And you can't predict the future. And with the transfer portal ravaging programs like Albany and benefiting programs like Big Ten and SEC schools, it's a tough spot when you're a schedule maker. But Kirk Ferentz and the Hawkeyes will probably have a pretty easy opening game tomorrow night. Now, the big question is, does Albany find the end zone or score field goal safety? Could this be another shutout? And we just saw Iowa shut out Illinois State last year, 40-0 in the season opener. So it'd be back-to-back season openers with no scoring allowed. Could it be that bad of a game tomorrow for Albany?
Yeah, it could be. I think the only way I envision them scoring on Iowa is an Iowa mistake. It's Iowa fumbling a punt. It's it's a fumbled snap. It's a interception that bounces off the receiver's hands and puts them in a position. I'm talking points, not field goal, not only let alone touchdown. I don't see them driving 75 yards for a touchdown unless it's against the third team defense late in the fourth quarter. And I really don't think the starters are going to want that to happen from their younger guys. They're going to be giving them really a hard time. But I also remember last year, it was 6-0 at halftime with 2 field goals. And you can't have that happen again either. Because Illinois State is a better program than Albany is. And I kind of come to the conclusion that, based on this game, that I would much rather see regional teams come to Kinnick if you're going to do this. Yeah. An Illinois State, a Southern Illinois, my alma mater, Western Illinois, come to Kinnick as opposed to, Northern Iowa, keep the money in the state, as opposed to bringing in a team like Albany, because you just don't know what you're going to get.
It feels like we're having a basketball discussion here, right. Talking about who we're not and who we are playing as far as non-conference games go. Todd Brommelkamp and Scott Dochterman with you here on Iowa Everywhere for about 30 more minutes, broadcasting from the Buffalo Wild Wings in downtown Iowa City in the old Capitol Mall, which I'm old enough. This used to be a Diamond Dave's when I went to school here, and I was actually here when this place opened, I think 2002, 2003, if I can recall correctly. Buffalo Wild Wings across the state of Iowa broadcasting the show this evening. So just remember, $4 Bud Lights at every Buffalo Wild Wings in the Hawkeye State. during Hawkeye football games this season, and we thank Andy and everybody here at Buffalo Wild Wings for their hospitality so far tonight. We've given you, you want to do a score prediction? You said 0. So I think we all know what Albany is going to come in on the score prediction. I see this as like 27-0 going into the half.
Oh, going into half.
And then you start getting the second and the third stringers in, and maybe the scoring slows down a little bit. But the spread on this with the legal sports books here in the state of Iowa, I saw it was 37. I think it's up to 38.5 right now. The total is in the mid to low 50s, which tells you everything you need to know about Albany's chances of scoring. I like Iowa and the under tomorrow. I see this one probably in the neighborhood of like 45-0.
Okay. I'm in the neighborhood of 52-0, but the same ballpark. I think they're going to score 6, maybe 7 touchdowns, or they're going to score, get a couple field goals. It's like I'm sure at some point they would like to have a field goal attempt just to make sure, okay, we know how to do this, and maybe at the end of the half situation or something like that. I think, again, just to envision Albany scoring is basically saying Iowa's going to commit a mistake damaging enough that the other team is going to score.
And again, you look back at some of the previous openers in the past where Iowa has struggled, and that South Dakota State game comes to mind. This is not going to be one of those games. No. I hate to try to put Iowa fans at ease the night before a game and disaster happens tomorrow, but this should be a fairly easy win. And of course, you do take into account that they are going to be playing Iowa State next weekend, the ranked team on the road in Ames. You want to get through, Kirk Ferentz, if he were here, would tell you, you want to get through this game and get through it relatively healthy. And that's all that matters for the Hawkeyes tomorrow night. I know the fans don't necessarily want to hear this. When I had my radio show, I used to always do on Mondays after the games a segment called Big Man on Campus, but I think it works here. You and I probably agree here, the guy that people are going to be talking about the most, win or lose, win, going to be the quarterback position, right? Any other, if you want to throw the dark horse out there, maybe somebody comes up with a pick 6 or something, but I think we both agree Mark Gronowski is the big man on campus Friday night, and he's going to be the big man on campus Monday morning. Exactly.
He's the guy everybody's going to talk about. And if he's 11-19 for 183 yards, 3 touchdowns, those are the kind of numbers I would expect from him. I think they're going to hit a couple of big passes. But here's something kind of narrow that I want to see from him, and this would lead us to that discussion on Monday as the BMOC, and that is I want to see him take risks, because he's not going to be able to take risks, or shouldn't take uneducated risks next week. But if you've got a tight window, you might want to try it this week. It's not going to kill your team if you do throw an interception because you're targeting somebody down the field. You're going to want to take a couple big-time chances. And I mean, can you imagine what the crowd would be like if first play of the game, there's play-action pass, you go deep, and it's a 75-yard touchdown?
Don't rule it out, but also don't expect it. We got about 30 minutes or so here. There's not a whole lot of, and not to be disrespectful to, when I hear Albany, I think of the Albany Patroons in the CBA. I can't remember I think Phil Jackson was coaching the Sioux Falls Sky Force, but that's a shout out for our Buffalo Wild Wings in the Quad Cities area.
Yes.
Maybe remember going to Wharton Fieldhouse and seeing the Quad City Thunder.
The Thunder.
Not to be disrespectful to Albany, but this is a game that the Hawkeyes should win, and then I think the A team will be back next week on Iowa Everywhere previewing the game that everybody wants to talk about. Let's spend a little bit of time here in the final 30 minutes or so of the show talking about the Big Ten as a whole. I'll ask you this question before we get into the Big Ten. Is it realistic to think that Iowa could win the Big Ten this year?
No. I think that's the one step. I think it's realistic to think that they can get to the playoff and
that was going to be my next question.
And see a path. If they beat Iowa State and they go 7-2 in the Big Ten, with their schedule, they should be in the playoff. The only reason why they wouldn't is name recognition, and then therefore that their commissioner has failed. To me, that would be the case. If they're 10-2 with the schedule they face, even if they lose to, say, Oregon and Penn State, the rest of the schedule is diligent enough that I think they deserve to be there. To win the Big Ten, I'm going to have to see more. I'm going to have to see Mark Gronowski have a Heisman-type season. I'm going to have to see the defense play like it did in 2022 with Jack Campbell and those guys, and I can't project that, Matt. But I think that this is a team that's capable of going 10-2.
That's not how the media works.
I'm
Scott, we're
sorry,
supposed to be
man.
hot take artists here.
I said no.
Let's say 4 Big Ten teams in the playoffs. We'll go Penn State,
Yes.
Oregon, Ohio
Yeah.
State, Iowa,
Yes.
could be Illinois. A lot of people are high on Illinois this year.
Illinois.
And then Indiana, can they repeat what they did last year? I think the Big Ten's got 4 teams in the college football playoff this year. I don't know who those other 2 teams are going to be.
I think that right now the tier is there's like tier 2.5, which I think is Penn State, Ohio State, and then Oregon is kind of in the upper crust. Oregon, with Dante Moore, I kind of wonder, can he be a great quarterback, or will he be like he was at UCLA, which is very marginal? I think he's got the talent to be a great quarterback, but I think those 3 kind of stand out. Then from 4 to 11, you can make a case for any of them putting themselves in a position to be in the playoff. We've talked about Iowa now for an hour plus. I think that they've got a pathway. I think Illinois, 16 returning starters. Luke Altmaier threw touchdown.
I love Illinois this year. And that's scary for Brett Bielema. And I know he's not. Well, we're not on in the Champaign Buffalo Wild Wings.
Yeah.
We should be. But anytime there's high expectations at Illinois, things don't usually end well. But I'm really happy with what I know he's kind of a lightning rod. Some Hawkeye fans don't like him. I still like the guy. But what he's been able to do there at Illinois is nothing short of impressive. And there's a lot of expectations there this year that they are a college football playoff contender. Let me ask you this. True dark horse here. Give me a team that you think, not necessarily following the Indiana route last year, but a team in the Big Ten that you think is going to be a tough out this year.
The only team that would be in the Indiana category is Purdue, and there's no way in God's green earth that they can make it there.
Devin Maccabee for Heisman, if that happens.
If they win 5 games, it's Heisman time for him. No, Washington is my team to watch. I really like Washington. I think Jed Fish did a phenomenal job last year getting them to a bowl game. They lost 21 out of 22 starters, plus their coach from a team that went to the national title game. He brought in a whole new group of people. DeMond Williams, get on board with him. He's going to be one of the best and most exciting quarterbacks in the country. He played a little bit last year. He was in the Sun Bowl. He threw for 4 touchdowns, ran for another. I expect him to be a tremendous player. Jonah Coleman might be the best running back in the Big Ten. And, he might be in the category of Caleb Johnson in yards and yards per carry. I think he's outstanding. Denzel Boston, wide receiver, is one out after Jeremiah Smith. He's in contention to be the 2nd best receiver in the Big Ten. So when you have that kind of trio of players, plus they were able to really supplement it well in the portal, this is a team that I think is very much capable of getting to 8, 9, potentially 10 wins and be a very fit contender. I mean, they're the type of team, because their biggest rival is Oregon. Even though they had the Civil War and the Apple Cup all those years, they actually hate each other more. And this is the type of game where if Oregon's 9-2 and Washington's 7-4, they're gonna
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, absolutely. They have a chance to knock them out of the playoff.
You can call me crazy. I don't think this is a playoff team by any stretch of the imagination, but I was watching Minnesota last night against Buffalo, and the way that they sort of, I think PJ Fleck channeled his inner Kirk Ferentz last night. They strangled Buffalo on that final drive, 9 minutes and 45 seconds, where they just bled the clock. I see them being a team that they may not win 10 games this year, but they're gonna show up and give you their best effort, as we saw last year.
No question. And they're really going to be relying upon quarterback in Drake Lindsey, who was, I thought, pretty efficient last night. He looked good, and he's got a big arm and is mobile, and he's only a redshirt freshman. And I think that he really showed a lot last night. And, even though that interception was a fluke interception where his guy falls down, it hits his feet, and it pops up in the air, and the Buffalo defender catches it and runs with it for a while. But you look positionally with them. Darius Taylor is one of the better running backs, and if he didn't get hurt last year, he didn't play against Iowa, almost 1,000 yards. I like some of their defenders. Anthony Smith, had 11.5 tackles for loss last year. This is a team that's really capable of winning some games. Now, their schedule is very challenging, but I also think that they if they won 9 games, that's something that I could see happening. I mean, they play Ohio State, and so they've got some difficult. They could play at Oregon, so they've got some challenges there. But they impressed me too, and they continue to do so.
Now we are in a couple Buffalo Wild Wings in Nebraska tonight, as I understand, not just in the Hawkeye State. The Huskers kicked things off last night in front of America's first family, soon to be, Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift. 17-0 over the Cincinnati Bearcats.
But that was Wisconsin.
Oh, that was Wisconsin, the Wisconsin score. My apologies. Nebraska getting the win last night. Your thoughts on whether or not this is the year for Nebraska and Matt Rule? It's year number 3 for Matt Rule, and you look at his previous college coaching stops, Temple and Baylor. Year number 3 was usually a pretty big year for him. They've got a quarterback who would like to emulate the guy who plays his games at Arrowhead Stadium. A full year of Dana Holgerson as the offensive coordinator, though, I think could be the difference maker for the Huskers.
They have everything is pointed in their direction to have somewhat of a breakout year. The schedule is advantageous for them until they get to the end. I mean, they play Michigan in the Big Ten opener, and then it's just kind of teams like them, and until they get to the end with Penn State and Iowa, and even and Iowa's in their same ballpark. Dylan Raiola, incredible arm, and seems to have all the ability in the world, and seems like he spent a lot of time in the mirror mimicking what Patrick Mahomes does, from his warm-ups to his haircut to the jersey he wears and the colors he wears. So there's a lot there in common. But last night I was not real impressed with them. I thought that they had opportunities to put away Cincinnati, and they didn't. And it really wasn't until the very, very end when Brandon Sorsby threw that interception to Malcolm Herzog at the very end of the game in the end zone. Otherwise, it looked like Cincinnati might have been able to at least force overtime. So they've got a lot to learn to grow. And this is a program that I think there's too much, let's look ahead. They're back. They're back. Well, since 2017 and Mike Riley's last year, they're 112th in wins in Division I football. I mean, they've got the second fewest wins of any team in the Big Ten, only 2 more than Rutgers. So take it step by step. They've got a team capable of that. I like Dane Key. I like the running back was terrific, Johnson. I think they've got the pieces to be successful. They just have to do it. And that's the step that they haven't done for a long time.
2017, the final score at Arrowhead Stadium last night. The 17-0 game, as you mentioned, was Wisconsin, which was the game that I wanted to get to. Does Luke Fickell make it through the season as head coach at Wisconsin? Because that does not look like a good Wisconsin football team.
Looks like a terrible Wisconsin football team. I mean, Miami's okay, but they're a MAC okay team. They're a 7-5 team in the MAC that might go to the Quick Lane Bowl or whatever it's called now in Detroit. So I think when you're looking at Wisconsin, you're saying, what do they pride themselves on? And their identity is gone from what made them successful for 3 decades, and that is, incredible physical running game and a defense that was in the right spots each and every play. Why they were number 1 or 2 in the country every year in run defense. That's not it. Now, granted, they shut out Miami of Ohio. Their defense looked pretty decent, and then quarterback Billy Edwards got hurt and he was out for the game, but it doesn't sound like it's going to be a long-term thing. So they had to bring in Danny O'Neal, but he was a guy who played a lot at San Diego State last year. I think their offense has a long way to go, and with this schedule, which is the most difficult in the Big Ten. I mean, you want to go. They play at Alabama in a non-conference game. Their October is murder. I mean, they play Michigan at Michigan, Iowa. Ohio State at home, and then at Oregon. And then, oh, by the way, when they get into November, they're also playing Washington, Indiana, Illinois, and their rival Minnesota. Based on what I saw last night, if they win one of those games, they'd be lucky.
October 11th at Camp Randall Stadium. Hawkeye fans, if you've never made the trip, I would say it's one of those things you got to do. Favorite road trip in the Big Ten while we're talking about Big Ten teams here?
I love Camp Randall as far as the stadium goes.
The atmosphere, the tailgating, the jump around. Yeah.
It's Iowa's sister program.
They are so close together, and that's why I think it's think it's interesting to watch how they are struggling with Luke Fickell right now because Kirk Ferentz goes into year number 27. Yeah. He's not going to coach forever. And it's a reminder that you never know what comes now. I look at Purdue, how good they were under Joe Tiller, and that program has fallen back to reality. Iowa's got a good thing going right now with Kirk Ferentz, and I think they'll have a good thing going this season. The Big Ten game of the week this week is not Iowa and Albany. It's Texas and Ohio State, and we would be remiss if we did not mention the final headgear pick for Lee Corso tomorrow in Columbus. Now, I've got a theory here. I think he goes with the Buckeyes because his very first ever headgear selection was Ohio State. He went with Brutus. I think he comes full circle there. I think I saw Ohio State as the favorite. It's Circa has it as a pick'em because somebody came in and laid like $500,000 on one side or something like that. A lot of people are going to be talking about Texas. Ohio State, I think, is a team that they're not as good as they have been. No. How do you see that game playing out?
A lot of questions, but they're like good questions for both teams to have. And I think as long as it's a competitive team, it's not a negative for either one to lose if that had to happen. You look at Texas, defensive line is fantastic. Colin Simmons is one of the best pass rushers in the country. Arch Manning is the guy everybody's talking about, and rightly so. He has all the talent and the tools in the world. You know, the pedigree is there, of course, but he also makes the pedigree work for him. But I also look at Ohio State. Julian Saint's not just some guy. I mean, he's a 5-star. He signed with Alabama and then flipped over to Ohio State when Nick Saban retired. They have the best player in the country on both sides of the ball in Jeremiah Smith at receiver, who would have been the first wide receiver chosen in the NFL draft after his freshman year last year, but he's not eligible. Caleb Downs is the best defensive player in the country at safety. They lost their entire defensive line, 14 draft picks last year, but their number 2 defensive line is every bit as talented as anybody else's number 1 in the whole country. It's just they haven't played very much. I think this is one of those field goal games. I think it's why I think the last line I saw before it must have went to pick'em was like Buckeyes by 1.5, and I think that's fair. I think it's going to come down to a field goal one way or the other. Somebody makes it, somebody misses it, and both teams are in the playoff, and they might play again in December or even January like they did last January.
The Big Ten slate tomorrow is not exactly, once you get past Texas and Ohio State, it is not very pretty. Northwestern is at Tulane. Ball State is keeping it in Indiana. They're at Purdue. Maryland will open with Florida Atlantic. Indiana has Old Dominion. Penn State hosts Nevada. Montana is at Oregon. Michigan has New Mexico coming to the big house. USC welcomes Missouri State to LA. UCLA and Utah, that game is at the Rose Bowl, and Colorado State and Washington.
This is what the Big Ten has given us, and they need to figure it out. And now, when it comes to scheduling the non-conference games, only 5 are of the power conference games are actually in the Big Ten purview of the major conferences. You know, like next week, they had to have a special, Fox had to have a special gear or whatever, pull a lever with the Big Ten to say, because they have a special window where they can only broadcast Big Ten games in Big Noon now, but they said, okay, it's going to be in Ames, because otherwise they're going to have like Florida International at Penn State, and they can't have that. So, but out of tomorrow, the sneaky good one to me is Utah at UCLA. Okay. Both these teams were 5-7 last year. Utah was, really faltered in their first year. Now, a lot of that was quarterback play, but they got a really good quarterback from New Mexico. And then, the biggest acquisition of them all goes to UCLA, Nico Iamaleava. Yep. And, that was certainly a high-profile pick. And I think the winner of that will probably feel pretty good about themselves. And plus, I like seeing teams that used to play in the same conference because, RIP Pac-12. But I think I like seeing these types of games when you can get them.
A couple games going on tonight. Michigan State is in action. They've been playing Western Michigan. And your alma mater, they're underway. Western Illinois is the opener this year for Brett Bielema in Champaign. I haven't seen the score yet. Now 21-0. Western Illinois is trailing early against Illinois. I guess, I think we've got about 10 minutes to go here, but if anybody has a question, I saw a question for you earlier
Yeah, we've gotten quite a few here, so let me kind of just read some of these responses and everything. And, Bus brings in a lot. Talks about Tim Lester being in the press box. He asks whether Bud Meyer will be the primary sideline communicator for the offense on the sideline, and will Ruggiero be in the press box with Lester. He's going to be in the press box. And Tim Lester prefers to be up there, and he should be, because when you're an offensive coordinator and you don't pound on the door of the replay official's booth, you should be in the press box. And harking back to
I was there for that.
Yes, that was a pretty loud scene, but really that should be the you should be up there because you can see the field, be semi-dispassionate, and I think that's really a smart move to have that. And Ruggiero, he was the long-time Warren Ruggiero, Wake Forest OC, brought Jeremy Aklinski with him. Really talented. They scored a lot of points, and his job is going to be looking ahead for Iowa. So, like Tim Lester, you kind of described it to me, is that way when they come back Sunday morning, they've already got the game halfway scouted based on what they're looking ahead at. So somebody's already got Iowa State scouted from their game against Kansas State, and they can walk in on Sunday, or probably could walk in tomorrow and start looking at them.
Any other questions you've got for us while we are here before we dig into this wonderful food that was we didn't order this. They just brought this here for us. But again, Buffalo Wild Wings, an official partner of the Iowa Hawkeyes, and you can enjoy $4 Bud Lights during Iowa football games at every Buffalo Wild Wings in the state this season. And that begins tomorrow night with Iowa and Albany.
We had quite a few comments, too, about the records here, and I'll kind of go through them. Bus says that they could be a significantly better team this year, yet fall short of last year's record due to the quality of the schedule. And he mentions 8-4, the +1 being very possible. I think that's fair. Jeff Schwenke says, I see the Hawkeyes as a 7-5 type of team this year. Kelvin Fisher 8-5. And so I think that's really good. And Jeff brings up Diamond Dave's. I remember coming to Diamond Dave's here.
Yeah. Started down here, and then it was upstairs, and now it's not around anymore.
Right. We had it in the Westland Mall in Burlington when I grew up there. So Jeff Weinrich, 47-9 is his prediction. So Ben asks, how long do you think they keep in the starting quarterback?
We kind of touched on that earlier, where I think he plays the first half, unless things just get really, really weird. I'm going to say midway through the third quarter as long as this game plays out the way that we think that it will, and it will.
Yeah.
I think midway through the third quarter, you probably see them, unless they've got some packages where they change things up and try to throw some. But I wouldn't expect them to put that on film against Albany with Iowa State coming up next week.
You're right. I think it's probably, depending on how the kickoff situation is in the third quarter, I think he has one series in the third quarter, score points, get off the field, and go sit on the bench. But there is one thing to remember about this, that they have not played together before. And they want to get experience playing against an opponent and seeing how he works the offense in front of a crowd and all of that. I'm sure their game plan, they're going to hide quite a bit, because next week is the week against the Cyclones that you're going to want to showcase a lot of that. So, a couple other things. Richard brought up that Albany was a replacement for South Florida when they dropped out to play Bama. And, of course, South Florida did play really well last night against Boise State. Kelvin brings up don't sleep on Washington, and Michigan has a really weak schedule. Yes, I did a Big Ten breakdown of their schedules this week, and Michigan's schedule is they don't play a team that won more than 8 games, except for Ohio State.
When you have 18 teams in your conference, you are going to have years where somebody gets a very favorable schedule, and then you're going to have years where teams have unfavorable schedules.
If you have Michigan and Iowa are both 10-2, name recognition usually tilts to Michigan. Schedule, no question, tilts to Iowa. And so that'll be a test for the committee to say if there's one spot left in the Big Ten and it's between those two teams and they lose to Ohio State and Iowa loses to Penn State and Oregon, where do they go? So Bus brings up Whiskey's in for a rough year.
I think the next time AD is out, Bus is going to be filling in instead of me. It'll be Bus and Scott.
Yeah, or you and Bus. Yeah. and he brings this up, and I think this is a fair point, that Wisconsin is a strong cautionary tale for Iowa fans and the administration as you move closer to a replacement for Kirk. I mean, they gave up their identity.
Yeah.
And now they're struggling with it. Iowa, in its replacement for Kirk, whether it's after this year, 2 years down the road, I don't see it more than 3 or 4, but you've got to make sure you live in that identity, because what his philosophy has worked at Iowa for almost 3 decades now, which is physical football. You can go out and get 6'4", 270 from Denison, Iowa, or from Independence, Iowa, and build them into a starting offensive lineman better than you can 4'3" at receiver. It just, they aren't around here, and they're going to go somewhere else anyway. So I think that's really something that they need to look at. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Crazy unhinged prediction here is Wisconsin somehow manages to go 6-6, but Fickell gets fired along the way, and Barry comes out of retirement to coach another bowl game.
He would love that.
He would love that. Yeah, absolutely. Thoughts on, what was the question? I'm distracted by the food. I'm sorry.
This looks really tasty here. As far as replacing Kirk at some point, I'm not going to ask you who to replace, because we can list a bunch of names, and that won't matter anyway. But
I think Beth Getz has a monumental task in front of her when that day comes, and there's going to be a lot of voices speaking to her, pulling her in a lot of different positions. But the one thing that I think that she has proven is that she is her own AD, and she proved that right out of the gate when she stepped in and made sure that Iowa had a new offensive coordinator for the upcoming season last year. So when the time comes, and look, 27 years, granted, you look at some of the pictures from early on, he's aged, but Kirk Ferentz, 70 looks pretty good on. I just hope to make it to 70. He looks good for 70. He looks like he could do it for another 10 years, like a Bill Snyder.
Exactly. And he told me when I talked to him this summer, he said, look, I think I could do it in at least another 5 years. But he goes, I also don't know what it's like to be 72 or 73 years old. And there is a drop-off in life. Whatever you're doing, all of a sudden it's like, okay, boom. And I think he's more than capable of doing it. And it's shown that he's been very successful because, over the last, 10 years, Iowa has the 5th most wins of any team in the Big Ten and 11th in all the power conference teams. They've had 4 10-win seasons since then. They've won 3 division titles, so they're not falling off. It's not like when we were seeing with Hayden Fry, where there was a real decline over the 90s.
I was here for the 1998 season. It was not a fun one.
I was there for the press conference for when he said, I'll always be a Hawk, and a lot of tears were shed around the state of Iowa, and rightly so, but it was kind of a long slope when he left. That there has not been the case here. I just think that when you look ahead, and when Kirk Ferentz decides to step away when he wants to, that you've got to say, this is the identity of football that has worked. We're going to continue that identity. Not to say you aren't going to change things, but you've got to continue the identity. And to me, I think that's the most important thing going forward.
Well, 90 minutes went by way too fast. Shout out to Aiden, our producer here on site in downtown Iowa City. We got the trombones walking by moments ago. The beer band is ready to strike up. Downtown is starting to get very busy, and it's going to be very busy tomorrow night, too, after a Hawkeye win over Albany in the opener. Todd Brommelkamp, Scott Dochterman for Iowa Everywhere. Enjoy the game tomorrow, and, of course, get ready for next week's big Cy-Hawks showdown.